So guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. So guys, there's been people talking about Andre Ward's comments. Andre Ward has recently said that if he's going to come back, he would rather face Anthony Joshua over Canelo. And I've been looking at people's reaction online and what they're saying. Um, what's my take on it? I think Andre Ward could potentially come back, but I think there'd have to be a lot of money on the table. He does look a guy that's satisfied. He's going in the Hall of Fame, but he's young enough to still come back. How old is Andre Ward? 34, 35, 36? I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's young, and he's not that old. There's guys older than him that are still probably fighting. He could come back. I don't think he should, because personally, I think both Canelo and Joshua would beat him. But this is the way I think he looks at it. He probably looks at it that he probably wouldn't want to come back and lose to Canelo. I think he would lose to Canelo now. He wouldn't want to come back because by losing to Canelo, that would hurt his legacy a lot more. If he was to lose to Canelo, because you'd be losing to a guy that's smaller than you. And Canelo right now is on top. I reckon he'd probably... What would he financially, what would be more lucrative? I think they'd probably be around the same. I think they'd be financially both big paydays for him. I think they both are huge paydays, huge paydays. Also, I think he looks at the fact that if he loses to Anthony Joshua, right, he's got not much to lose, because people will say, well, Anthony Joshua was a lot bigger than me. You know, he'd say Anthony Joshua was huge and he was a big guy. So losing to Anthony Joshua he won't get as much stick for that. Do you see what I mean? Where losing to a guy that's smaller than you or around your size, you'd get a lot more stick for that. So I can see the method behind it. Also, he probably looks at Anthony Joshua and looks at vulnerabilities and maybe thinks he can exploit it. I just think Andre Ward is too small to exploit those weaknesses that Joshua has, the vulnerabilities that Joshua has. Whereas Canelo, he hasn't shown any vulnerabilities in terms of chin, in terms of stamina. He's actually getting better. Yes, Canelo can be outboxed. We saw that against Mayweather. But right now, Andre Ward's not in the peak. He's not at his peak. He's not in his prime. Yes, when Andre Ward was in his prime, you'd say, yeah, you'd have to favor Ward. But this isn't the same. This isn't the same Andre Ward. And I just think Canelo's body attacks, his youth, his punching power would affect Ward. It'd be a problem. Yes, Canelo's not as big as Ward, but that's not... I think Canelo's a huge guy. He's a strong guy. He's a very good boxer. And I think that would be... I don't think Andre Ward's faced anyone as good as Canelo. So it would be a fight where he'd be taking a fight against a guy that has a very high skill set, probably the best skill set he would have ever been in the ring with, and he's also not in his prime. With AJ's a good boxer, no doubt. He's a good fighter, but he's got vulnerabilities. But like I said, he wouldn't get that much. He wouldn't get that much. I think people would give him a pass if he loses to Anthony Joshua just because of the sheer size of Joshua, right? Because people would, going into that fight, Ward would be an underdog and he'd be seen as too small. So if he pulls that off, that would be like, if for example Andre Ward beats Canelo, right? He's not gonna get that much credit because people are gonna say, well, he's bigger than Canelo, he's got good skills. If he was to beat Anthony Joshua, who's a heavyweight, who's far bigger than him, he'd be getting huge credit because a lot of people would be seeing him as an underdog. A Ward-Canelo fight would be seen as more even. Yes, Canelo might be a little favorite now just because Ward's a little bit past his prime. But with Joshua, he'd be seen a massive underdog just because of the sheer size of Joshua. Right? And I know Andre Ward said in the past that size doesn't always matter. And he said that, you know, he feels he can overcome the size of Joshua. And he goes... size ain't everything. Ward said that, but I just think the size difference here would matter. You know, the size difference between Joshua and Ward is huge. Huge. Cruiserweights would be massive compared to, like, Tony Bellew would be huge compared to Andre Ward. Right? And Joshua dwarfs, as Tony Bellew said that, I dwarf Andre Ward and Anthony Joshua dwarfs me. So imagine Joshua in a ring with Andre. It's like, it's too much of a difference. It's too much of a size difference, height difference, reach, everything is just too much. Andre Ward for me was never a big puncher or even a light heavyweight. So is his punching power gonna affect AJ? I don't think so. I don't think because he's not going to be strong enough to get on the inside against AJ. AJ is good on the inside. He's not going to get on the inside and be able to bully Anthony Joshua. He's just going to put himself in danger. And Ward's not exactly got a granite chin. We know we've seen him hurt and down. Kovalev put him down. Kovalev can put him down. Then AJ can definitely hurt and put him down. So no, I don't think that's a good matchup for him at all. I don't know why if he was to come back. Now, I did see the interview. And he was being asked a question if he was to come back and face Anthony Joshua or Canelo, who would he say? It was like a rapid fire answer question kind of game that he was playing. So it wasn't like he actually said I would come back and I'd fight AJ. He was just being asked if he did come back. So I don't think we should read too much into it. But I don't personally think he comes back, and I don't think he faces either guy, and I think he would lose to either guy. I do. I think Canelo beats him, and I think he would have more chance of beating Canelo. But I don't think he beats Canelo. I'd have Canelo the favorite in that fight. I think against Joshua, it'd be undersized. Even though I think he's a better fighter than Joshua, I think he's more skilled. I think he's better pound for pound for sure. But I don't think he can beat Joshua just because Joshua's too big. Yes, just because a guy's a better fighter than somebody, if you're too small and the guy oversizes you, like I think Mayweather was a better fighter than Klitschko, but that doesn't mean I think Mayweather can beat Klitschko. I think Mayweather was a better fighter than Gennady Golovkin, but I don't think Mayweather could have beaten Golovkin, right? So that's just the way I think size plays a big part in boxing, and I think that that would show if Andre Ward was to fight Joshua. Like I said, I think Andre Ward is a better fighter than Anthony Joshua, but I don't think he could beat Anthony Joshua. And I think most people would agree. I think most people would agree that Anthony Joshua's size would be too much for Andre Ward. Andre Ward is not even a big light heavyweight. Andre Ward may even struggle against someone like Beterbiev right now, let alone fighting Anthony Joshua, who's far bigger than Beterbiev, punches far harder than Beterbiev, right? It wouldn't be a wise move. It wouldn't be a wise move at all. Size differences like that and big size differences, especially against a guy that's skilled, right? Would be very, very difficult. Even against Andre Ward, against someone like Deontay Wilder, who's not technically the greatest, would be very difficult just because of how long and how tall Wilder is. The size difference will be massive because Andre Ward isn't going to hurt those guys, whereas those guys could really hurt him badly, So the Canelo fight would be a more winnable fight and the less riskier fight. The Joshua fight, yes, I can see that Andre Ward probably looks at Joshua and looks at vulnerabilities, but also a punch from Anthony Joshua could end Ward's night, So I don't feel that either fight. I wouldn't favor him in either fight, but if he was to come back, the Canelo fight's more sensible. The Anthony Joshua fight would just be crazy because Andre Ward won't be able to beat Anthony Joshua. He won't be able to beat Anthony Joshua. It's just too big. It's too big, too rangy, punches too hard. I don't see how Andre Ward could beat him. How can Andre Ward just in my head, like looking at sizing both two guys up, like picturing it out in my head, I just don't see what Andre Ward could do to beat him. I don't. Even though I think Andre Ward's a better fighter than Joshua, I just don't see how he can beat Anthony Joshua. I just don't see it. So if he was to come back, the fight that he should want is Canelo. But again, like I said, from a legacy point of view, him losing to Canelo would hurt him a lot more than him losing to AJ. Because like I said, if he loses to AJ, people will just say he lost to a heavyweight who was too big for him. Whereas if he loses to Canelo, that would hurt his legacy because people will say, well, you lost to Canelo, a guy that was smaller than you. A very skilled guy. And yes, Canelo is also a better fighter than Anthony Joshua. But again, Canelo wouldn't beat Anthony Joshua because Anthony Joshua is way bigger than Canelo. Yes, Canelo, for me, is a better fighter than AJ. But he's not. The fact is, this isn't who's a better fighter. There's weight classes that separate these guys. So, I just don't think I just don't think it would make any sense. Personally, I think it would be crazy for Andre Ward to come back and fight someone like Anthony Joshua, especially when you're not even in your prime. You've taken a few years out. That would be crazy. That would be a crazy move. It would be a crazy move and a move that he couldn't win. I think, like I said, if he was to come back, he should target the Canelo fight if he is thinking about coming back, which I don't believe he is. But if he does think about coming back, the Canelo fight is a fight that a lot of people would want to see. So I think that's a fight that I think if Andre Ward wants to come back, he should have. Listen, I wouldn't even mind seeing Andre Ward fight Canelo, because I think Andre Ward would be able to get himself in shape and would be able to get himself in to give Canelo a good fight. But it's just the case, when you've got the legacy that Andre Ward has got, would you want to come back and fight someone like Canelo Alvarez, who's at the peak of his powers, who's looking very, very dangerous right now, very, very good boxer, and you're not in your prime, and if you lose, it's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt your legacy for sure. People are going to say, well, Canelo beat him. Yes, he'll still be a Hall of Fame fighter. He'll still be a great, yes, of course he will. But still, it hurts your legacy. Why come back and put your undefeated record on the line? You know, he's not lost since 12 years of age. Why would you want to put all of that on the line fighting Canelo? I don't get it. I don't get it, you know? And the fact that he's been inactive, I don't know whether Andre Ward's been keeping himself in the gym. I don't think he is. Probably is, I don't know. He looks in good shape. When you look at him, doesn't look like he's blown up or anything, but I don't think it'd be wise for him to come back and fight either, just because he's created a great legacy, and by him coming back and losing will just hurt that, you know? He'd lose his undefeated record and that stigma that you have as an undefeated fighter, you know? I just think he should stay retired. You know, I don't feel a fighter should retire and come back. There's very few fighters in the history of boxing that have retired and been able to come back and be a success. It very rarely happens. And you know, Andre Ward's got a great job. He's a great broadcaster. Just stick doing what you're doing. There's no reason for him to come back. But that's my take on it. Leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think. And guys, remember to please like, share, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.